Welcome to Rates and Barrels. It is Thursday, April 3rd. Derek Van Riper, Trevor May, and maybe Eno Saris just fell off frame if you're watching us on YouTube. There he is. Oh, he got a ball. Very nice. Foul ball?
No, for grips.
Oh, yeah. That's super helpful. Good idea. Good prop. Good prop to have handy. Lots of ground to cover on this episode. Plenty of extensions to talk about. We talked about Jackson Merrill yesterday, but Garret Crochet recently extended. Kristian Campbell, as we were signing off yesterday, got an extension with the Red Sox. Ketel Marte gets in on the party, extends an already multi-year deal further into the future. We'll talk about that. We got Jurickson Profar suspended for a positive PED test this week. Esteury Ruiz getting a fresh start. Eno wrote about the kick change for The Athletic. We'll dig into that. We're going to take a look at how Trevor and pitchers might actually use some of the new information from StatCast against hitters. So we'll talk about that as well. So a lot of places to go, plus arm angle changes from the first time through the rotation for most teams. We'll talk about what that could mean for pitchers who have moved in various directions. So a lot to cover and some housekeeping up top. You listen to us. Now we want to hear from you. We're asking you to fill out a quick survey about you and your podcast habits by going to theathletic.com/athletic/survey25. 3 lucky entries will win a $100 or pounds worth of Amazon vouchers too. So whether you're a longtime listener or a new one, we want your feedback. That's theathletic.com/athletic/survey25. Thank you so much. We'll put the link in the show description as well. It'll be right there alongside the link to join our Discord. All right, guys, let's begin. Garret Crochet, recently extended by the Red Sox, 6 years, $170 million. Trevor, if I had told you this time last year that any team was going to give Garret Crochet a 6-year, $170 million deal, would you have believed that was even possible?
I would have definitely believed that it was possible if it were 2 or 3 years in the future and he had thrown 2 more full years of innings. I believe he's maxed out last year at 146. He also has no minor league innings, so it's like there's just not a lot of body of work there with some injuries involved. So it is kind of a big risk, but I will say in terms of performance, and if you are counting on him being healthy and you're confident that he can stay healthy, that he's figured something big out, the pitching itself, he's definitely clicked. Something has clicked there with the use of that cutter and his repertoire and the way that he is getting people out. That's sustainable. I think that banking on him being successful when he's pitching, it makes sense. But the being healthy part, I think there's a lot to be proven there. Pretty crazy, to be honest.
Yeah, I mean, he's as much as he has advanced the sinker, he's throwing it 7% of the time, and still using the sweeper 6% of the time, and the changeup 6% of the time. You might have noticed all those numbers are below 10%. I mean, he's pretty close to a 2-pitch pitcher. Fastball, cutter. It is one of the best fastballs in the game. So I get it, and I think that what I get here also is it is, you know, at his age. When you're older, like when you're signing like a Justin Verlander, you might get, you know, an injured guy, and then you might also, you're not sure exactly what kind of production you'll get in terms of, you know, stuff and, you know, strikeouts and stuff. With Crochet, you're like, he's either great or he's injured. And that can actually work for today's teams, I think, because of the unlimited 60-day IL situation of like, you know, just, you know, kind of rotating in a new arm and just being like, hey, do we want a guy who's going to be great if he's in or give us a roster spot if he's out? It seems like that's the calculus there. There's a little bit of a residue of Chaim Bloom in the Rays here where it's like, you know, get a great guy, maybe he's injury risk. But if we build up enough pitching depth, it's like the Dodgers too, right? Get a bunch of great pitchers. If they're in, and we're golden. If they're out, we just have to be able to develop guys.
I mean, you see it in the Tyler Glasnow extension. You see it in acquiring Blake Snell and signing him to a 5-year, $182 million deal this offseason. And
those are the comps for the deal in a way, right?
Yeah, Snell's 32. Garret Crochet turns 26 in June. So you're talking about a guy that, because of the injuries, doesn't have a lot of mileage on his arm. One of the injuries in college was a comebacker off the jaw, and that was a 2020 season too. So he didn't get a chance to even come back and log innings at the University of Tennessee. So there's some kind of bad luck, fluky injuries in there, lost development time to the COVID year. I think you can look at this probably as more of a glass half full or even kind of like a win-win sort of deal. Given what Crochet has dealt with health-wise, I can understand why he'd want to go ahead and get this money prior to reaching free agency, which would have been after 2026. And I can understand why the Red Sox would say, this is a guy that could actually, on a per-inning basis, hold up as well as Skubal or Wheeler or anybody in the game right now. So you take that.
Yeah, if he throws
down one time during the deal, you're still probably coming out ahead as long as the stuff comes back post whatever injury there is. And he just had Tommy John a couple of years ago. So hopefully that UCL is actually in good shape.
Yeah, and a good point to point out that like if he does throw 350 innings over the next 2 seasons, then he would have gotten a bigger number than this.
Right. So there was a chance that didn't happen for a variety of different reasons, but I like this from the Red Sox perspective. I think it's smart to lock up Garrett Crochet even at these terms. Getting Kristian Campbell for 8 years and $60 million is another one of those deals. I think it's even tighter than the Jackson Merrill one because you don't have 1 year on the ledger. You have 1 week on the ledger at the big league level for Kristian Campbell. I could understand being in his shoes and saying, I'd like to get that guaranteed money locked in right now. This to me feels like the Alex Anthopoulos approach to roster construction, trying to get your core locked down even beyond the club control years for an affordable price. They did it with Brian Bayo too a year ago. And they did it with Ceddanne Rafaela too. But I think Campbell has a chance to be a lot better than Rafaela. This to me is like a snap. Absolutely would do it 10 out of 10 times if I'm in the position of Craig Breslow or any sort of decision maker in Major League Baseball. If you're Kristian Campbell, is it just as simple as saying I'm young enough to actually still hit free agency again at the end of the deal and get an 8-figure payout later on? I mean, he's 22 right now. So there's a good shot that if he's the player we expect him to be, the foray into free agency, even though it's pushed back a couple of years, will still be fruitful then too. And hey, $60 million is nothing to sneeze at. So how do you feel about this deal overall, Trevor?
I love it for the Red Sox. You mentioned the Anthopoulos, strategy. Everyone should be trying to do that strategy because it's not easy to do. By all accounts, he kind of just approaches guys and he pesters them a little bit. Just keeps saying, hey, what about this? What about this? What about that? We take this? Will you take this? And he's gotten a bunch of guys who've bought into to being on that team and want to be there and then see that other guys have done it. So it's a snowball effect. So if they can get that going in Boston, that's ideal because in the long term, it is cheaper. If you're signing your homegrown talent, guys are more bought in. You're showing that you're committed to them, and they're generally you have to pay less money overall for them. Kristian Campbell, that could turn into like an Ozzie Albies situation. I mean, obviously that is a extremely cheap contract, but by all accounts, if he plays as well as he wants to play, he's going to be worth more than that. But like what you mentioned, being 22. And in 8 years, he's 30. That's not that different than his normal free agency would have been had everything gone perfectly, which it rarely does. Who knows? It may have taken him 7 seasons to get to free agency because of some up and down stuff. So like now he's kind of hedged against that stuff. He's guaranteed to have $60 million. So I like it for him. Team friendlies are more palatable for me in this situation when it's only a year or two of the actual free agency being accounted for. And then you go look at the numbers, it's like 13 and 16 million for those 2 years. So it's backloaded anyways. So even those years he's getting paid the highest. So it also makes more sense for him there. And then he'll still, everything else factored in, he'll still hit free agency and have that like participate in the market in the way it's put together in this almost exactly the same way. So it kind of kills 2 birds there where it gets him an early payday and doesn't like ruin the market for second baseman because he signed so early. Jackson Chourio, same thing, right? He signed before he even got to the big leagues. He's going to have another free agency come up and the team locks him down and lets him get comfortable quickly. I think it's more of a benefit in players than maybe team friendlies that are signed like with 2 years left before free agency.
Right in the sweet spot. As far as performance and multi-year projections, how do you look at Campbell based on just a limited, very limited run in the big leagues? We're projecting off of mostly upper level minor league performance from a breakout 2024 season.
Well, he's already hit the ball 112, and so we know that he's going to probably make good contact in terms of the swing strike rates in minor leagues, even what he's done in the first month. You can look at swing strike rate, you can look at contact rate, you can fold in some of spring. And I think if you can say, hey, he's going to strike out around 20% of the time, he's got a max EV of 112, these are things and he has defensive value. Those are your three things that you can say, I think, pretty well. The rest will sort of fall in around that as he grows, and obviously has upside. But if we just use those things as your pillars for a comp, 112, defensive value, strikeout rate around 20%, you get an interesting set of comps. Wyatt Langford last year, Marcus Semien last year, and I understand some of these guys have different ages, but Marcus Semien, Freddie Freeman, Francisco Lindor, and not too far from Gunnar Henderson and Corey Seager. The worst name that I can think of that sort of fits on with these three pillars is actually JJ Bleday. And actually he has a lot in common with Jackson Chourio. Jackson Chourio hit the ball 111.6, had a 21% strikeout rate last year. So and has defensive value. So if the worst comp is JJ Bleday, I think you're in a good spot. In fact, Jackson Merrill is a decent comp.
Yeah. Yeah, and if they'd waited a year, it probably would have cost them the Jackson Merrill deal plus a little bit more to get a deal done with Kristian Campbell.
If he did all that Jackson Merrill did. But just based on this limited stuff that we can kind of compare him to comps, the comps are good. He has the bat speed, he has the contact, and they, as an organization, the one thing I really admire about the Red Sox as an organization right now is that they have their, KPIs, their key performance indicators, their things they believe in, and they make decisions based on those, and they are aggressive based on those. So their player development is really aggressive based on those. They just have their North Pole, in all cases. And it's something like, and it wouldn't surprise you, there's a lot of driveline over there. Jason Ochart is the former director of hitting, is now their director of hitting. Kyle Bodie is a high advisor there. And it wouldn't surprise you at all to say bat speed and stuff plus are basically the North Poles of the Red Sox right now. And who do they sign? Kristian Campbell plus bat speed, and Garrett Crochet plus stuff. So, I mean, they're doing it at the major league level and they're doing it at the minor league level in terms of how they develop guys.
Jim McCaffrey's been doing a great job covering the Red Sox for The Athletic. She had a report, too, indicating the Red Sox are also pursuing extensions with Roman, Anthony, and Marcelo Meyer, too. So they are really trying to push.
I think the Meyer one
in.
is the trickiest, actually. There are some scouts that think he really has a hole low in the zone, on breaking pitches and stuff like that, and they doubt his approach. There's other scouts that wonder if he is a shortstop. Even the Red Sox have talked about playing him all over. But the thing is, as an organization, you sign all these deals, and one of them doesn't work out, and one of them pays for the rest of them. I mean, the Astros signed, John Singleton to one of these deals, and it didn't work out, but it didn't stop them from ticking. It's
and
also
he's still there.
Yeah,
did not.
That was 7 years, 10 million. By the way,
yeah, it was a pretty small one.
A little bit different. Yeah, about as small as it get.
Yeah, but I think who is another team that's done this? I mean, I can't think of the team the one that the Braves messed up on, but. The idea is you do these 3 or 4 times and maybe one doesn't work out, but the other 2 pay for it.
Evan White, Kingery.
Evan White was and Kingery, yeah.
Yeah, and those were really aggressive, but even smaller totals than what we're seeing on Kristian Campbell. And I think even if you believe in those players at the time, I think they had less prospect hype, less juice, kind of.
It's a good point.
Big league regular sort of scouting reports, whereas Campbell has been in the last year, especially clearly projected to be a well above average big leaguer.
Yeah, but it's a good point that those numbers were smaller. So you are pushing it if you start signing $60 million deals, $80 million deals. I mean,
and more than just adjusting for era too. Like it's
Ceddanne
not
Rafaela. So they did Ceddanne Rafaela. We'll see. We'll see.
Yeah.
I don't really like the approach. If he ends up being a utility guy, that could be sort of the Kingery pathway, right? And that's $50 million. What if Ceddanne Rafaela gets DFA'd over the course of a $50 million contract?
Didn't he just walk last night for the first time, like 250 at bats?
He did walk last night. He had 2 hard hit balls too.
I watched it live.
Change.
Sayano Perez, who doesn't walk a ton of people either now, just 4-pitch walk to a guy who
There you go.
You gotta say, hey,
Maybe he got up there and was like, I'm not swinging.
I'm not swinging at all.
One last note on Campbell, by the way. He was the youngest Red Sox player to debut on opening day since Joe LaHoo in 1968. There's some trivia for you. How can you forget about Joe LaHoo? Joe LaHoo.
The who?
One more extension to get to. Ketel Marte gets 6 more years and $116.5 million with the Diamondbacks. This one, reminded me a little bit of the Xander Bogaerts deal with the Padres, not in the sense of the terms being 1-to-1 equal, but more in the sense of why exactly did they feel like with years remaining on Marte's deal, they had to extend him. We're talking about a guy who's quite a bit older than everybody else that we're discussing. He's 31 already. He's had an extensive injury history. And by underlying numbers, like, yes, I can get excited about a career best barrel rate in 2024, but we're looking at a long track record where he hasn't hit the ball that hard over full seasons before. So what do you think compelled the Diamondbacks to go out and do this with Ketel Marte?
I don't really know. I don't really know. And, there was that time where they couldn't stay healthy. And, even now he's had 2 seasons where he's more than 600 plate appearances. He doesn't offer plus defensive value. I mean, I did just say Campbell has defensive value. He does have defensive value, but he's not a plus second baseman and he's 31. So at some point he's going to be their DH, I think, in the life of this contract. They must have just liked the number because that's what you sort of point out. It's not the Xander Bogaerts number. So they must have just liked this number. I mean, if you do an AAV on that, it's below $20 million a year. So maybe it's the idea is, if we're going to hit up against the luxury tax, over the course of this deal, we're going to be happy that we stretched them out. It's almost, they have this concept in basketball where you stretch a veteran to change his cap number. And that it's going to hurt at some point, but it helps you get more players in the meantime. So you keep this guy who obviously has plus bat speed and makes contact, which is a theme, I think. I think teams really love players who, have that combo. He was like a borderline MVP candidate, and you're getting him from $20 million a year. I think it's just he wants to talk extension? Oh, that's a reasonable number. Yeah, we can do that, as opposed to like being really worried about the top end number, $116 million,
Yeah, it's not the most interesting part of the analysis here, but I did notice that it brings down the year-to-year salary just a little bit in these next couple of years, with Arizona being the team that kind of surprisingly went in on Corbin Burns. Maybe it's just staying a little further away from the tax or something along those lines internally that also kind of made them pursue this, even though Marte himself really wasn't that expensive. We're talking about a couple million each year for the next couple seasons. And
$20 million a year, in that over that extension, you basically, in today's environment, you could be a league average player. Zip says he won't even be a league average player until 2027. So, and that's a 2.3 WAR prediction. So, that's still there's still like 5 more years after that. But though it's also it's not a science that is really dialed in when you're projecting guys out 4 or 5 years.
And I guess to kind of say some nice things about Ketel Marte, he's an underrated player. Like I will not like walk away from the conversation like, terrible deal. It's more just the timing was a little strange to me. It just seems like the kind of guy that you did a good job getting an extension on Ketel Marte. You're getting surplus value. Why give some of that up and take on that future risk? Good for him. It's always good. I'm always excited to see players get paid. Trevor, what's your takeaway on Ketel Marte, though? How well do you think he's going to age as a guy that's done a good job tempering whiffs and, as Eno said, does have that plus bat speed?
Well, I think this combination, how this thing got done is, one, he was a 7 WAR player last year, so that's exciting. You can throw that up, especially if the team's like, hey, maybe they were like, hey, let's talk extension. They're like, well, would you be willing to take like I said, shave off a little bit here in the short term, and in exchange, we'll add some on to the end in terms of years and stretch out. So you have security, but you're giving us a little bit more flexibility to continue to build this team into a perennial winner. That could be a conversation, and it's just rare. We're all kind of surprised by it because it's rare that the player and the team's on the same page here and they both want the same thing. That's not we don't hear about that very often. This reminds me of I remember after 2015, Phil Hughes set the strikeout to walk ratio record, refused to throw an extra third of an inning to get his $500,000 bonus. People said it's because of the ratio. No, it's just because he's lazy and didn't want to pitch again. And his words, not mine. And
someone tell Phil
and then he got extended for 2 more years, and there was just he had another year on his contract. There was no leverage for the team to do that. And he didn't really have any leverage. And they just it was kind of like throw him a bone and let's lock down one of our guys that we can count on. And, that didn't really work out for the next couple of years, but like it made more sense the longer I thought about it and saw kind of what the point was and how you build teams. You want to know who the heck's on your team a little bit. And the Twins at the time were doing a lot of that stuff. So it feels like, hey, you're our guy. You've been our guy. You've performed well. Is there, maybe there's a way that we can get some added benefit here and to continue to make the team better, because we are confident that you're going to be a contributing player for a while, even if you become a DH, even if like that WAR number starts to come down and defensively you're not amazing. We're covering everything else pretty well in the team. The team's pretty well rounded, and if you do this, we can make it even better. Rwanda with giving more opportunities. I think that's what it came down to. So I like it in that way. And then at the end of the day, Ketel gets $160 more million. So I'm sure he's like, oh, I don't have to worry about this again. I don't have to worry about free agency ever again. Probably. Awesome. So it's a win-win.
Yeah, maybe a year-to-year guy by the time this deal runs out, if he's still got something left in the tank. And I guess if you think back to Marcus Semion's deal a few years ago with the Rangers, that was 7 for $175, and that was entering his age 31 season. Semion's durability versus Marte makes them very different players, but when you think about how hard Marte hits the ball, maybe things are actually a little bit different in terms of how these two guys are going to age, even if Semien plays second base for the duration of that contract and Marte moves to first or DH, still probably a good player at the end. All right, let's talk about this Atlanta situation. Jurickson Profar suspended 80 games for a positive PED test. I don't even think it's that interesting in the sense that Jurickson Profar landing in Atlanta was kind of a ho-hum, like, oh, they did something sort of move for me. I think it's a reminder that when you see something that doesn't make sense or something that seems too good to be true, it probably is, right? I mean, and I'm talking about Jurickson Profar adding bat speed last year and unlocking this new level at a point in his career where a lot of players really don't increase bat speed that much. So it's a blow for an Atlanta team that's off to a miserable 0-7 start. But does this really change the way you feel about the Braves in 2025 in a significant way, Trevor?
I'll be honest. I know that they signed Profar, and in my head, I was like, that was probably more likely an outlier than a indicator of future performance. I didn't expect him to be better this year or even probably as good as he was last year. And I think the Braves weapons he was probably the 5th or 6th biggest weapon anyways. So they need Olsen, Austin Riley, they need Acuna back, and they need Albies to hit. Like those guys have to hit, because if they don't, Profar is not going to make up for their production. I didn't see that coming. So in that way, I was just like, I don't think it's going to hurt. I mean, it hurts because it's a blow to your hope as a fan base, especially when he's the only guy you really signed. So like, then you're like, oh, we're the same team that ended miserably last year at the end. So this doesn't feel great, and we have less of a bullpen. But that said, like, yeah, it's a lot of interesting circumstances around the thing. I know we don't know exactly what happened. It was kind of casually mentioned in the first article written about it that I read, that spent a lot of time working out in the off season with the Tatises, which I'm like, that doesn't seem, why is that not being, why are we not talking more about that?
Can we pull on that thread some more?
But the one thing we know about Fernando Jr., they're both great hitters, so like that makes a lot of sense. But like, I don't know what happened. It is blow, and it's kind of like the torpedo bats, right, with the Yankees. It's a huge story because of the timing. Like the team has just started way more miserable. No one would have guessed this, because it's not even this. There's no way this is predictable. Them being 0-7 now, and then to lose a guy that way, that then calls into question, and the team's like, did we get tricked? Like it's extra controversy on top of the team truly not able to finish the game right now with a win. So I think it's blown out a little bit there, but I don't think that in terms of I don't think he was going to be as big of a contributor to like in WAR to this team's win total as he was to the San Diego Padres last year, even if everything was, he was fully healthy and whatever. A lot of stuff went his way, and he to have a career year. So I don't think it hits him as hard that way than it does more in the controversy. Like, the feeling in the clubhouse probably is hit more than the production on the field.
Yeah, I mean, the them starting out 0-7 is not good, and it just makes all the narrative go in a certain way. Like you're saying, it spins the Profar situation a certain way, and it kind of just puts a certain tone on the beginning of the season that you kind of have to work hard against, as a team to get out of, in a way that going 0-7 in July may not do. The Dodgers had times last year where they weren't good. And I don't know if they lost 7 in a row, but there were times where we were looking at them and saying, I don't know, too many injuries. I don't think they're going to do it this year. And they got it together. I read an interesting piece by Neil Payne on his Substack where he was saying that the average team that starts out 0-7 wins 69 games. Now, I don't think the Braves are the average team that starts out 0-7. They're a better team than that. If you look at Fangraphs, they've still got an 88-win projection. The Phillies at 89.6, the Mets at 86.7. So they're still in the mix. They've maybe lost their they were north of 40% to win the division. Now they're at 33% to win the division. They're still at 69% to make the playoffs, but that is not nice if you're a Braves fan, because those are all lower numbers now than they were before. Payne ends his piece saying that according to ELO ratings, which is it's another kind of projection system, basically, he thinks that the Braves will be an 82-win team, and he thinks that feels about right. Not 69, not 88, 82. That would be a disappointing year. But it is in the realm of possibilities, because Strider is going to be coming back. He may come back to full strength, or he may have a year where it looks full strength sometimes and it doesn't other times. And I would say the same thing about Acuna. So maybe the Braves are just a team that are going to be better next year. There are teams that kind of ebb and flow, and the Braves themselves have won a World Series recently and also looked pretty bad in subsequent years, and this may not be their year. I mean, I hate to jump off the bandwagon at 0-7, but it's not a good start, and the pieces may not just be there this year.
Well, yeah, it's easy to feel that way, and I think when it's the first 7 games, it feels worse. I did run a stat head search. This Atlanta team is the 20th team in the expansion era since 1961 to start 0-7. Only 2 went on to finish above 500, but I don't think when you lose 7 games matters that much. I think it's more instructive to look back at teams that have just lost 7 in a row at any point and see what they have done. I shortened up the search to just the wild card era since 1995 because it's easier to make the playoffs with more spots now. There have been 5 World Series winning teams that have had a losing streak of 7 or more games. Most recently, the 2023 Rangers actually had a 7-game losing streak and still went on to win the World Series. So I don't think it's not good. There's never good to lose 7 games. But you have the 2011 Cardinals. The 2006 Cardinals had 3 7+ game losing streaks in the same season, still won the World Series. The 05 White Sox and the 2000 Yankees are the others. So it's just one of those things. It feels awful right now in Atlanta. But if you believed in this team a week ago, you should still believe in this team now. I think those first win projections he threw out there are just a reminder. It's going to be a tight division. We talked about that last week on our season preview. We expect the NL East to be a battle with those 3 teams up top all season long. It just the Atlanta Braves just made it harder on themselves with the way this season has started.
They also had a tough schedule to begin, and they knew that there might be a slow starting team with the Strider and Acuna situation.
Getting walked off on Shohei Ohtani bobblehead night, man, that's another kick in the beans.
Oh, and what a star he is! First pitch, walk off, he's just.
Yeah, he just knows. He knows these. Yeah. He understands the assignment. That's for sure.
Right, versus Trout, he's like, he just.
Of course, it lined up that way.
He's ready for all this,
Yeah. It's so funny how when people ask him direct questions about that stuff, he's always so I don't know. And you're like, come on, but maybe it's just natural. But hey, let's not forget about the Braves. And I was there and I watched this happen. They did win 71 of their last 100 games in 2022 to win the division. And it seemed like they were just the kick at the end of a 400-meter race. And they just no matter how hard you're running, they're still getting closer to you. So they have this is the same way that this stuff happens. This group can also rattle off 12 straight wins like it's nothing too. There's not a lot of teams that could do that. They're one of them.
Right. Teams that have been in this position before or have played exceptionally well over a prolonged stretch as a core together. I mean, Houston, I think, has that sort of benefit of the doubt. Even when they were struggling beginning of last year, maybe we were a little quick to say that the era is over, but they managed to find their way back into the postseason despite a disappointing start. On the flip side of this, Dodgers at 8-0, 12 teams have started 8-0, including these Dodgers. Of the previous 11, only 2 went on to win the World Series, the 84 Tigers and the 90 Reds. 6 missed the playoffs pre-wildcard era. Only 1 in the wildcard era. The 03 Royals started 8-0 and actually missed the playoffs. So
in the wildcard era, I feel like an 8-0 start is like, okay.
It's a big deal. Yeah.
You're going to, even the Padres one, it's like, okay, you're probably going to be a wildcard team this year.
Probably going to be a playoff team if you start 7-0, 8-0 in the wildcard era. Last Dodgers question for you. Esteury Ruiz, fresh start, getting out of the Athletics organization, becoming a Dodger.
Terrible for Esteury Ruiz. Great for the Dodgers because he's got options.
Yeah,
right. So now he's
runner,
up and down extra guy that may have to wait a little while. But what type of player can Ruiz actually be in a different organization? Fresh set of coaches getting into his ears. Like, what should Esteury Ruiz be doing? Obviously, tons of speed. He fits a little better in the corner than in center. Probably good enough to play center in a pinch. I think is probably the right way to describe Esteury Ruiz, despite the speed. But can he put all the pieces together as a hitter? Like what, Trevor? You've seen a lot of Ruiz. Like what should he be doing? What would optimize him as a hitter? What could the Dodgers tweak with him?
It's interesting because it's hard to. I was always trying to figure out what his intent was, how he saw himself. And I think that there was just a lot of wanting a little bit more juice out of his bat with Oakland, which is understandable, especially if you want him to be your center fielder. And that felt like it might have got forced a little bit, especially having him be out there because he's athletic enough to play center field. That's not the problem. It's just the actual skill set of tracking balls and making good. And he's got a good enough arm too. It's just gotta put him in a place where it's a little bit easier to take better routes. I think that putting him in a position, maybe corner outfield, a little bit less pressure to be the middle, star type of guy. He was trying to force this power in the Coliseum of all places. So it's only going to tell you have no power even more than most places. Mm-hmm. And I think if it was staying in the gaps, getting your homers, maybe getting in double digits if you play all year, and just your number one asset is your legs, stretching extra base hits, stretching singles into doubles, stretching doubles into triples, and stealing bases. I mean, that is, and then just being serviceable in the outfield and not striking out that much, which I feel he got off the barrel a lot, but he was making a lot of contact. He fought in ABs. He didn't walk up there and just swing 3 times and walk back. I saw very few of those from him, which told us, it's not that his strikeout rate was really low. I believe it's still a little bit above average, but our entire team was pretty high. And I think it's more of an approach thing or what we're trying to do. I think he has the natural skill to put the ball in play a lot more, not just chop it on the ground and try to beat it out. That's a little bit of an old school thing, and that I heard sometimes with him, and more of a, try to get the barrel on the bat, or get the barrel on the ball early in the at bat, and then just try to get the ball in play because he's got that type of run speed. And you can be a 9-hitter and go play on a team all the time and be maybe a left fielder or utility type player. But I just think that his legs are just too good, man. He led the league, and one full year up. He was as a rookie, he led the league in stolen bases. And then he's just out of the league again. The guy just disappears. And usually those guys are around for a while. So there's something there, and that's something that needs to be in the big leagues. And it's not just a Terrence Gore situation. He can swing the bat a little bit, and he's got more tools than that. So, but said earlier, I don't think that the Dodgers are the place that's going to all come together. He's going to be more of a Terrence Gore
in terms of opportunity. Yeah.
I
mean, I think they're probably going to use him more like Terrence Gore. But I do think him being around Tommy Edman might be interesting because Tommy Edman doesn't walk a lot. Tommy Edman makes contact. Tommy Edman hits 50% ground balls. Tommy Edman is not trying to hit homers. at this point. Tommy Edman is just trying to make contact and hit line drives. And there's a lot in common there where he could, on the upper ends, replace Tommy Edman or be a Tommy Edman where he can play all over. Maybe not the best, maybe not as good as Edman, but he could play second. He can play corner outfield. He can play center in a pinch and make contact he could be the next Tommy Edman by the end of this contract. So, that's the upside, but I fear it's more of a Gore usage in the meantime.
Fourth organization in 4 seasons now. On the one hand, teams are trading for him because they want him. On the other hand, it's just been a bit of a revolving door for him the last couple of seasons.
When I said that teams love really high contact, high bat speed guys, he's not really either of those.
Yeah. I wonder what they can do. But it's going to wait it out a little bit at AAA before he gets an opportunity. He's going to take an injury or maybe a bad slump from Andy Pages before Ruiz probably finds his way onto that roster. Let's talk about Eno's recent writing. Get your story about the kick change up on The Athletic. Is this going to be the year of the kick change? I think we've kicked this question around a little bit in the past few weeks because it seems like a lot of guys tried to pick one up this spring. And are we seeing a follow through? Like we talk about new pitches every spring and then they disappear on opening day because the feel or the confidence in those pitches isn't necessarily there. But are we seeing the same sort of interest from spring carry over with this pitch so far,
Yeah, I think so. Landon Knack threw some in Japan. Jameson Taillon has thrown them in both of his starts. Jack Leiter threw some in his Cincinnati start. Hayden Burnsong will throw some when he gets in. And Davis Martin with the White Sox has already thrown some. And when I looked in the database, I had already over, I think, 200 kick changes thrown this year. So it's happening. It is a circle change, where you've got the circle there, but you're tent poling this middle finger here. And I think the way it's been explained to me, or at least the way that I think it was Jack Leiter was talking about it, and maybe Birdsong was, they are slider guys. They are supinators. They are these finger dominant. And the circle change can take the pointer finger off the ball. But then a lot of guys find that this finger is still dominant for them, slider guys. So when they throw this ends up commanding the pitch and almost as well as their index finger would. So it ends up basically pulling it and on the seam. So by tent poling this, now you're taking your 2 dominant fingers off of it, and it kind of allows it to kind of squirt out, and come out in a way that changes the axis. It's not like you're breaking balls anymore, and it kills the spin. And so it ends up being a pitch that drops. It does not have sideways, and it has a lot in common with the splitter, but it's even harder. It's basically a power change that doesn't go sideways. So Greinke's power change went sideways. It had some similarities to a sinker. King Felix's power change went sideways. These are power changes that go straight down. 90 miles an hour is the average kick change right now in baseball. I think a lot of people are breaking ball guys that can't even, because even with a splitter, I think you can get in trouble because you're still using your 2 dominant fingers.
Yeah.
And so splitter's not the answer for every guy who's like a slider guy. It can still come off, and it can still be high spin sometimes. Like it's hard to choke spin sometimes when you're a spin guy. You're like, my best thing is I have spin. Oh, and you want me to throw a pitch with no spin? Okay, how do I do that? So this is it's really powerful, and it's spreading quickly, and it's coming a little bit from Tread Athletics, so it has a place where people are learning it. And if you look through the different players, they either all were at Tread, or were like met somebody
or play with somebody who went to Tread.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Yeah.
So that's how the grip is spreading really quick. I mean, Andres Munoz is throwing it, and he said he just saw it on Instagram, and he couldn't even tell me who he saw it from. He was like, just some player, and I was like, a pro player, and he's like, no, it was a minor league player. And I was like,
it was a Tread video. I know exactly which one he's talking about.
Yeah.
And the guy I did it on my show mid-A like we broke it down, like what the kick change was, and it's it was a college guy who throws really hard. A guy who throws like 97, 98. I think he was one of the like a big guy who's going to be a first rounder. And he was like, they were working on the kick change. Getting the finger out of the way is really interesting to me. It basically, for all intents and purposes, is splitter movement. It's a splitter without the splitter grip, but that you're getting the same dynamic movement, and it's actually more consistently down, because even splitters have, sometimes you get one finger, like you mentioned. Estrada's is like crazy slow, and then it moves crazy to the right.
The Smith-Shawver splitter, and a couple of those went like flying towards the
my goodness. He was the guy I was going to say, because there's some great slow-mo video of his just absolutely just devil pitches from the other day. He threw one to Manny where Manny was like, that was terrifying. And to be honest, Smith-Shawver was like, got away from me a little bit. I think no one was that nasty. But if you watch it in slow motion, it spins in that supinated, like even the splitter, he gets the spin supinated. It's like almost slowly seam shifted spinning, which gave him more of a crazy
kick of the ass. I think that's part of what the kick is. People want to know what the kick is.
What the kick is. I think it kicks it off axis. That's what it's for. To give you the seam shifting.
On some level, like the finger, when you release it, kind of like it actually does some of this. I don't think that the pitchers are actually like flicking
it up. It just naturally does it.
Yeah, because what happens when you have a ball in your hand and you release it, it's your hands are going to flatten out. So
I actually have what it actually does is when you release it, the last finger it touches is that finger. So like it just touches it right at the
getting
end.
The finger out of the way more. So then now it's your ring finger that's determining the axis as opposed to your two fingers.
Which is why everyone used to spike curveballs, because they struggled to get this finger out of the way. So when they tried to spin it would hit that finger and mess up the spin. And so they would start to spike it, get that out of the way so they could use their middle finger to roll it off their middle finger. Tyler Duffy was a big one who showed me that. Like he rolled out of bed and was like, I can open my eyes. The first thing I do is start a curveball. I can do that. Like it's just one of his pitches. And
that's why I taught my kid the knuckle curve. And
I had the same reason, but I used to fully put my knuckle flat on the ball like Pedro Martinez did. Evidently that's to slow it way down, which is I didn't want it slower. So I tried to throw a spike that couldn't. And then I put my finger on because my middle finger was I didn't have that problem. And so I was always trying to spike thinking I had that problem, and I didn't. And so I maybe for 10 years was throwing a pitch that I didn't need to throw.
But it speaks to how quickly things go too, because like the first time I ever heard of the kick change was Hayden Burnsong last August, because I was talking to Logan Webb and he's like, you like grips, you gotta go talk to Birdsong, And then I'm like looking at this thing and be like, what the hell is this thing? And then, the next spring already like 20 big leaguers are throwing it. So that doesn't seem like a lot, but and it isn't really in the grander scheme of things. Like sweepers took over the nation, and sweepers are like 4 to 5% of of pitches that are thrown. But the way I wrote the story was like, when is a pitch? Like when does the kick change become a pitch? And maybe it has to do with how often it's thrown, how many people throw it. But also the thing that will keep this maybe from ever being its own pitch type is that with the sweeper, you will probably throw a slider too, and so the catcher needs to put a sign down, and the analyst needs to know, is that a sweeper or is that a gyro? Like these are different things. Whereas with the kick change, I think it's another type of changeup grip. I don't think there's going to be a lot of people throwing kick changes and another changeup.
Yeah, true. I agree.
It'll be just that's their changeup. So
it won't be a pitch. It won't necessarily become a pitch classified as a separate thing by StatCast. We're not going to
it'll be called.
We're not going to get the green light from Mike Petriello and Tom Tango.
I doubt it. The splinker, we'll see. The splinker is a little bit more like you might actually throw a splinker and throw a sinker, or throw a splinker and throw a splitter or something. Like you might actually do that, and that would be terror on the catcher to, if you called one and got the other. And even like a model like Stuff Plus kind of would probably rather dial those in than just put all splinkers in one place with, or not even know where to put the splinker.
All right, let's move on to another topic. We've started to wonder with the shiny new toys that are available at StatCast. This year, it's like positioning in the batter's box. And we looked at it yesterday. Here's the graphic we talked about on the Wednesday show with Rafael Devers. Came from Red Sox Stats on Blue Sky, showing just how different Devers' stance was now to begin this season compared to the summer of 2023. And I guess thinking about this in the same context, maybe as knowing that a guy like Anthony Volpe is using a Torpedo bat, like how are you using new toys, new information like this against a hitter, Trevor? Like what would you do? How quickly would you want to change your scouting report and your approach? We'll use Volpe as a very specific example. Like, would you start pitching him differently right now compared to the scouting reports and books you had previously on him, given the changes he's made?
I think there's two kind of categories of that you look at and you make decisions based on. And I actually hadn't made this distinction so much. I think I was just doing it intuitively when I was playing. But like there are unconscious things that a player does, and then there are conscious things. So like you think of, I would think of, is this an intent? Is this showing me some change in intent? Like what these guys are trying to do in certain situations? Or is this does this demonstrate a change in like natural swing path ability to handle a pitch that you weren't able to handle without thinking about it? And try to determine which one of those two areas any of this data might point you to. So like, for example, the feet thing, there are certain hitters who drastically change where their feet are in the box. I'm going to use an old school example of this because it was blatantly obvious when it was happening. And unfortunately, I think this guy might have had help when he had this year. But Brett Boone, when he used to open up with two strikes, like that was an intent thing that would tell you he's trying to do something different, and opening up allows him to do that with the bat and not strike out, probably continue to hit the ball harder. And then as a pitcher, you then go, okay, he's trying to not miss the ball, so let's give him something to hit really soft, right? Like that would be the give and take there. He's telling you something. So if
allow him to have this contact, then not
allow him to have it.
Yeah.
Make him think he's getting what he wants and he's not, right? And don't try to go for the thing that he's actively going against, because
let me throw
he's
one
aware
that I
of
know too. Paul Konerko told me that he would shift, and he's like, it was after he stopped playing, so I can tell you now, but he'd basically, instead of being his back foot being parallel with his front foot, perpendicular to the plate, basically, he would shift his back foot so that it was like pointing more towards the catcher. Basically, he would be lined up for opposite field.
Yeah.
And so if you saw that, if the catcher saw that, it'd be like, oh, he's trying to go to the opposite field. He's trying to see the ball longer. He's trying to fillet it. He's trying to go over there. That's the two-strike approach. Your catcher might see that though. And something pointed out about the difference in today's game from just 5, 10, 15 years ago. I remember Buster looking down at the catcher's feet one time and changing the call. Do you think there's, in the era of the pitch clock, there's as much ability to kind of look at a pitcher's at a batter's adjustment in the box? Oh, he's closer than he was, or he's further, or he's back in the box, or he's turned his foot, and then change your pitch call?
Well, especially with nobody on base, no, it's impossible because you can't call time. So there is no time call. So I actually know this for a fact. There was a conversation I had with Manny Pena in 2023, and he said one of the biggest frustrations he had from the clock and that he didn't like is because one of the things he did was always pay attention to guys' feet. He played for the Reds for a long time. They played against Chicago Cubs a lot. He played against Rizzo. Rizzo's big, and we've seen this. I don't know if you're aware of listeners, but you can go find this really easily. Would blatantly, obviously, move way up into the box when he thought a breaking ball was coming sometimes. And he did it a few times last year, and nobody could do anything about it. Even if you saw it, he didn't need to be sneaky at all, because he's like, you cannot call timeout with nobody on base. But with somebody on base,
you've already put the pitch comm in.
You've already put the pitch comm in. The pitch comm is notoriously much slower than signs as well. It just is. You need time for the thing to be like, say the full pitch. And so some people have switched to just being numbers. A little bit 2, 1, 2. It'll just say a sign, which is faster. But you can't change the sign. And if someone is on base, you got to use one of your step offs. Now, guys on second, they might do it more often, but now there's much less opportunity to do that. Pay attention, so hitters don't have to be as sneaky about it. They can like they can blatantly tell you what they're trying to do. So that was one frustration he had, because he's like, I felt like I was good at this, and now 90% of those situations are gone, which stinks. And that's something that not a lot of pitchers, I think, see intuitively, but if they have a catcher who does, they're willing to change the thing. And you got to get more creative and got to be really on top of it if you want to do it. Like no, you got to have audibles or something if that's something you do regular. People do to you because you throw a big slow curveball and you throw hard, but you throw something slow. That's something that might happen to you more often. Then you have to plan for it, which there's only so much time, and it's just extra stuff to remember. And there's probably very few people doing it. So yeah, that's tough. And when it comes to, let's touch on Volpe real quick. When it comes to the bat and like things like that, I would say I would start looking at approach more recently and try to weigh that against things that happen long term. So it's going to be hard here at the beginning as usage happens for a little bit of time, and figure out like how his intent has changed based on this, knowing he's using this new bat, and if he's making different swing decisions. And if that's the case, then you got to figure out a way to get off the barrel another way. The nice thing is avoiding the barrel is still the name of the game. And the barrel is still the same size, and it's just in a different place. So,
I mean, he's also moved it a half inch, so it's like,
yeah, it's not like a ton.
Yeah,
and it's not like you were thinking in terms of half inches back then either. But it might say, maybe I'm more likely to hit if I feel comfortable throwing my sweeper. Now that's a half inch farther off the barrel. What he was hitting towards the end of the bat, and it was more barreled. Now he's not barreling those near as much, so that might be a pitch to use. But it's not going to show up in the data for a while. So you might have to do, and not a lot of guys are super confident and being like, well, if this is happening, then this might happen. So I'm just going to try it in the middle of the game in the 8th inning up a run. Like it's just, it's right. Probably going to have to play itself out.
The stakes are too high to be wrong, right?
Yeah, the stakes are too high to be wrong.
But I'm sort of fascinated by what you were going to say, Derek.
I was just going to say, it's just going to change, I think, where your hot spots are in the zone. Like, you're going to do damage in different places with a different bat. Probably. It's going to change things about where you set up and things you can hit well and things you don't hit as well. Like, that's my first guess as to what's going to happen when you tweak something like that. And maybe you make yourself overall more dangerous in places that you would get frequently exploited by making that adjustment. But there has to be some kind of trade-off. There has to be something that does not work as well. It's just the laws of how space and everything works when you're trying to
that's what our bat expert said, was like, if you are a guy like Juan Soto who's turning the bat very fast and wants to spray the ball to all fields, then maybe the Torpedo is not for you, because you can hit the ball, away from the sweet spot towards the tip and still maybe hit it out, because you have that plus bat speed. But I think this also sets up a classic dichotomy between wanting enough sample size to believe in a stat, and then also wanting to move fast enough. Like, there's like advanced scouting and player acquisition analysts probably see the game very differently. Advanced scouting is like, what has he been doing the last 2 weeks? Player acquisition analysts are like, how good is he really? And those two things are at a an impasse sometimes, because if you just look here, Anthony Volpe's heat maps. So first are Anthony Volpe's heat maps from all of last year. Big sample. He's like, you got a middle to get power, maybe middle away, right? He makes contact middle and low. So like, I see these heat maps, I'm like, I am throwing him high cheese, for whiffs. I'm throwing him inside cutters. And I'm trying to set up breaking balls out of the zone, right? Because, even at the bottom of the zone, he can maybe make contact with those. And I see a classic guy who has a bit of a scoopy swing, and just don't want to miss middle and, miss in on him and miss down out of the zone and up out of the zone and bust him in on the hands. Well, there's a bust him in on the hands. And he took it the other way.
Yeah, opening day against Freddie Peralta. Yeah.
Yeah, and then the cutter, the cutter swing, like this one, that's not even in the zone. So then, just setting up what Trevor was talking about, this is this year's heat maps, but the sample is 98 pitches on the left. Yeah, 98 pitches just generally. His contact zones have changed. He now makes contact better away from him. And he's still I still get a bit of a scoopy sense. He's got that down. It's middle and down. But then he has this huge and of course, if you're looking at a heat map, there's 2 homers up there. But there's not that. It's 98 pitches, but he hasn't put all these pitches in play. So you're talking about like maybe 6, 7, 8 balls in play. Like that's going to change your heat map and make it obscene, I guess.
Yeah,
but
it really is. I apologize to anybody who's taken off guard by that. That was popping on the screen like, oh, well, yeah, oops, no, it's not our fault.
But
the map
like,
says.
Yeah, if you're a pitcher right now, like. And we're doing like a how to pitch Anthony Volpe segment, and I come to you, Trevor May, like I've got these 2 heat maps. Which one are we looking at?
I'm still probably the first one. Honestly, doesn't really right down the middle. Got it.
Yeah, right.
Right. Which is an issue. I think a lot of people when Volpe would go dry, he couldn't hit much out down the middle. What that's telling me right now, with his contact away, but his power in, like now. His ability to hit pitches and hit them hard. That range is much bigger, which is exactly what they wanted. He's hitting more types of pitches harder. He also struggled, and this has been something they mentioned about him. And when I prepared for him, it's something you could see too. He struggled to pull the ball with authority, not pull it. He could pull the ball. It's just he is a guy who lets the ball travel deep. And kind of has one of those like right center natural kind of swings. It looks like he's trying to go right center, not necessarily that he is trying to hit it over there. But guys you can tell guys like Isaac Paredes have like a hook. Like he breaks his hands the moment he starts moving his hands. His wrists are already breaking because he wants his barrel facing the left field wall when he hits it, like or the pole even. Like I played a lot of these guys who would just constantly wrap the ball into the dugout over here every time it's just naturally how they were. Volpe's the opposite. And that's kind of like LeMahieu. Prime LeMahieu was kind of like right center. And they're like, you got to be able to pull the ball with authority as a right-handed hitter in Yankee Stadium. You just do. And he's like, well, how can we get that while not sacrificing this natural ability to get my barrel to cover the zone and hit that pitch up and away hard? And it looks like the Torpedo bat's their answer to that. Now, I don't know if he's moved closer to the plate. I don't know how that's going to happen over time, if guys are going to have to go farther and farther and farther in there, or if he's just going to keep going closer and taking it away completely, which would be my guess because the barrel's helping. But it looks like it might help him just outside of just hitting one type of pitch better or one location better. It looks like multiple positions, and he's covering a higher percentage of the plate in all. And if that's the case, then now, and you have to like force yourself to try to figure out how to get him to chase more or something. That's a losing proposition over time. The longer a guy hits in the big leagues is they tend to learn how to chase less. So if you're having to rely on chases, that's exactly what Anthony Volpe and the Yankees want. And it seems like that early indicators that possibly happening.
Yeah. It seems like that's the gap sometimes between average and good or good and great is getting to the point where basically a pitcher has to make you chase to get you out. If you're doing that, you're hitting stuff in and all over and around the zone. You're a dangerous hitter.
It's interesting. He hasn't really changed his X and Y location in the box, but he's changed his angle.
Has he closed off a little bit?
Yeah. Yeah, he closed off a little bit, which I guess would augment your ability to use that torpedo bat.
If you remember in the playoffs, both him and Wells had super leaky hips, and neither one of them could hit. They were going early; they were just missing everything. So that might be a separate adjustment. That he's just like
different adjustments, yeah.
Which then they just happen to parallel each other and make sense. So he's not pulling off balls, because with that approach, and if you pull off balls, not only are you going to not hit anything hard anywhere, you're going to miss a lot more. And so closed off with that kind of approach he already has with his natural swing.
Stanton is like the super close stance, right field lasers, Chas McCormick, super close stance, right field lasers, So I guess, there's also the philosophical question as a hitter. Do I change my stance to, improve my bad parts, or do I change my stance to, augment my good things, Yeah. And it seems like he's been like, well, if I'm kind of a right field guy, then why don't I close my stance off? And then maybe I use a bat where the harder part is a little bit closer. And then, when I'm making contact, the contact heat map, away from me, to doubles to right field. But
it's still
maybe
good, but I can
have the turn and burn because I'm close and I've got this bat that the sweet spot's a little bit closer.
This is no longer a hole. It's something that I can work with, but this is still my bread and butter.
Yeah.
But it's so easy to look back at the previous heat maps and see what the Brewers were thinking with those fastballs up and in, and then to go, this is why it didn't work, right?
I mean, there's no red in the top third of this zone. It seems like this is a guy you can definitely pitch up behind the zone.
Yeah. Yeah. So nice adjustment for Anthony Volpe. We'll see what kinds of counter adjustments are to come, but it looks like a better version of Volpe is certainly possible at the start and changes he has made so far. As I said up top, be sure to take the survey. It's in the link in the show description. So jump on there, join our Discord as well. You can find us on Blue Sky. Eno is enosaris.bscout@social. Trevor is IamTrevorMay.bscout@social. I am DVR.bscout@social. Thank you to our producer, Brian Smith, for putting this episode together. That's going to do it for this episode of Rates and Barrels. We're back with you on Friday.
Thanks for listening.